Hello and good morning, friends. Today we're going to be going and chlorinating a well. I want to walk you through what do I do, how do I do it, so that way you can make sure that you're safe while you're doing it too. Let's get into it. The first thing we're going to make sure we do is come down into the utility room, take a look at the pressure tank, work our way over here to the water treatment, see what we're working with, and make sure that we get everything in the bypass mode. Super important that you are not running chlorine through any of the water treatment, especially the water softener. So it's not going to necessarily cause any major issues, but you do run the risk of, if you have chlorine going through a water softener, you could destroy the resin, making it less effective, and then you have to rebed the tank, and that kind of sucks. So now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the actual well casing. So we can see here that somebody has used some zip ties, since I guess they're missing some bolts. Not the best way to secure a wellhead, but it is what it is. So we always want to make sure that you look at the casing, see if there's any holes, check the conduit, check the cap. So that way, if anything's loose or broken, you can go ahead and repair it. Now, you can chlorinate even if there's a hole in the casing, but you do run the risk of, if you don't fix the hole, you're immediately going to run into issues of bacteria getting right back into the well. We don't want to do that, right? So over here, you see that I'm using my little hacksaw to cut these zip ties off. That's because I have no idea where I put my pocket knife. So we're going to use whatever saw is readily available. Next thing we're going to do is go ahead and pop off all these bolts. Using an impact is super easy, straightforward. It is an aluminum cap, so you just got to make sure you're conscious of how aggressively you're working on it, but usually just kind of unscrewing it's perfectly fine, right? So you're going to want to make sure that while you're doing this, the power to the well pump is off, right? Now, this house is vacant, so it doesn't really matter, but you want to make sure that you have the power to the pump off, so if somebody starts to run water in the home, the pump doesn't accidentally cycle while you're touching those electrical lines. So I'm looking right here, and I can see that some of the gasket is kind of flaking away and falling apart. They didn't want us to do any additional work to the actual cap. They just wanted the chlorination. Okay, perfectly fine. But it is important that if you're going to go through the process of chlorinating, that you also go ahead and consider fixing the cap, replacing the gaskets, or replacing the cap. We give everybody the option, and we tell everybody what's going on, and so then they can make the choices for themselves. So what I'm doing right now is I'm actually measuring out the amount of chlorine tablets I want to put into the well. Generally, how I do this is I take that little tag that's on the side of the well, look up how deep it is, and then I'll measure out how much chlorine I want. It's very important that you put a good amount of chlorine in there so that we can actually kill off the bacteria. After you let it sit for a few minutes, then you're going to do what's called a recirculation. So I usually like to let it sit for about 10-15 minutes, and then I turn the power back on, and I get a hose, and I start running the water through here. What I'm doing right now with the flashlight is I'm actually looking to see what does the pitless adapter look like, right? So underneath of this casing is going to be the pitless. The pitless is basically what connects the water line from the well pump to the water line to the home. Sometimes the little gasket that's in there can start to leak, or the pitless itself can start to leak. Usually by running the water and watching, you can actually see the water squirt out, and then now you know you have to deal with the pitless as well. So you want to recirculate the water so we can get the water flowing through with chlorine, and basically that rinses off the interior of the well casing. Super important to make sure that you do that so that we can kill off any of the itty bitties and bugs that are in there. So we can see right now what I was doing was testing to see if chlorine's present. Not yet, so we got to let it run for a little while longer. We're going to let it run for about a half hour and see what it does. If you don't let it sit for a little while, what will happen is those chlorine tablets can actually get stuck in the screen of the well pump. I usually like to let it sit for a bit, just so that way everything has a chance to fall out of suspension. Now, this process is a good idea to do. Could you go ahead and chlorinate the well without recirculating? Yes, you could, but you do run the risk of not killing whatever the intrusion point for the bacteria is. So we can see here that I'm running it for a little bit with my test strips. We got a nice bright purple read, so that means that we've got a good amount of chlorine in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and rinse off the rest of the well casing. So what I usually like to do is I like to rinse everything. That's why in the beginning you see that I put the electrical connections over to the side, right? So I rinse everything off, let it run for a little while longer, and then next what we're going to do is we're going to go in the home, and then we're actually going to run all of the cold fixtures throughout the house so we can get the chlorinated water through all the internal plumbing. The reason you want to do that is that chlorine is super corrosive. If you have an electric water heater and you put it into hot water, you do run the risk of causing issues and damage to the water heater. So now that we have everything circulated, we've run the water in the home, the next step is to go ahead and put the cap back on. I've grabbed 2 new bolts that we were not using the silly zip tie. These bolts are super cheap, super straightforward. Just go to Home Depot, you can get plenty of them. So we're gonna go ahead and put these on, screw this back on, and then basically you just let it sit. Whenever you have a chlorinated well, you wanna let it sit for about a day, right? By letting it sit in the cold pipes and in the well itself for about a day, that should have enough time to kill off any of the bacteria. If you've not gone about dealing with like the cap or the conduit or any of the other things that might have been broken or potentially allow bacteria to infiltrate, you do run the risk of having bacteria come back, right? So in our state, usually what they recommend, and by they I mean the state, you chlorinate the well, you let it sit for a day, you run the chlorine off. You test the water again for bacteria, and then after a heavy rain or 2 weeks, you test again. And the reason you want to do that is to check to see if the grouting has gone bad. With well construction, you're going to have the casing. That's that brown pipe that we see right over here, right? Well, that's going to basically keeping the hole from collapsing on itself. But you have to fill the annular space, which is the space between the casing and the earth, with either bentonite clay or concrete. Well, let's just say that we have an earthquake go through. You know, they happen from time to time, especially in Maryland. You do run the risk of that grouting cracking, right? And if you get a heavy rain and you have a crack in the grout, that water from the surface can actually work its way down and into the well, potentially contaminating it. The grouting basically is your seal. That's what keeps all of the stuff from above getting into the well and potentially causing problems. So now we've got everything squared away, right? The cap's back where it belongs. It's time to go ahead and wrap up our hose. It's a good idea to make sure that when you're wrapping your hose up, that you completely drain it. Again, remember, chlorine is incredibly corrosive. So if you have, a metal end at the tip of your hose or at the bottom of your hose like I do, if you don't get all the chlorine out, you do run the issue of potentially corroding it, all right? You also don't want to have chlorine sitting in that pipe in case you decide that you want to go and water your plants. Guess what? Chlorine will kill off those plants. Could also make it to where if you're drinking out of it, you're drinking chlorine water. Not a good idea. I hope you found that interesting today. Hopefully you learned something. If you didn't, that's okay. Leave a comment below. Tell me, what did you do when you had bacteria in your well? I love to hear these comments. I love to have the discussion. If you enjoy content like this, I have more videos posted every day on the World of Well and Septic. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Till next time, guys.